Okay. Yeah. So what that means, and then you have this pillar of fire. Okay, the more you read and the more you read the Bible, the more all of those dots go bloop, 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 bloop in your mind, and they remind you. So when you hear the words, our God is a consuming fire, you know what that means. Okay? Yeah, right. And guidance, right? And love. All of those are in the idea of fire. Yes, it can be either, right? It was good to Israel, but it wasn't good to the Egyptians, because when it moved and went back behind Israel, then the Egyptians were like, okay? So the idea is, the idea of fire and Yehovah being like fire is the idea that if you are his friend, then the fire is good. If you're his enemy, it's not so good. Okay? I think that's pretty neat.
So if the fire was in front of them, they're following.
Exactly. Following it rather than running away from it. Yes. Okay, then Pharaoh will, this is Yehovah is now in the next chapter here, Pharaoh will say that the people of Israel are wandering aimlessly in the countryside. The desert has closed in on them. I will make Pharaoh so hard-hearted that he will pursue them. Thus I will win glory for myself at the expense of Pharaoh and all of his army, and all the Egyptians will realize at last that I am Adonai, or Yehovah, and the people did as ordered. Okay, what was going on is God is setting it up so that all of Israel and all of the army of Egypt is going to realize again who's running it, who's the boss, right? Okay? And this quote by Alter is that God has set up what amounts in military terms to an ambush. Okay? And Dennis Prager writes about this, that in spite of the plagues and all the other miracles, the Egyptians still do not recognize God as the God of the world. Okay? Sarna, whom he quotes, is a very famous rabbi, okay, who's written a very famous comments on Torah. Sarna argues that the words, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord, means the Egyptians will finally realize the world is governed by a moral order that must ultimately prevail. Very interesting. Okay? Now, what does he do going after Israel? Pharaoh. He takes 600 first quality chariots, as well as all the other chariots in Egypt, along with their commanders. Okay? So he's going after them with what was in their day a modern army. Israel didn't have a modern army. Israel didn't have chariots. They had maybe some weapons like knives or things like that, but they really didn't have any weapons. They were going to get some weapons later. Where would they get their weapons? Later. From where? Yeah, from getting rid of... initially, it would be from the bodies of the dead Egyptians that washed up on the beach. Okay, and then, so now they're going to have weapons. So now they'll be able to go to war, fight against Amalek. So it's a win-win. Okay? Unless you're one of the Egyptians. And then it's not. Right? Now, the children of Israel are in the middle of this, and when they're in the middle of this, all they know is that they are trapped. Okay? The water's in front of them. The Egyptian army is behind them. In this area of the Gulf of Aqaba, there's like a gorge coming out of the mountains that leads down to this beach area. But once you're on that beach, the only way off of that beach is back up the mountain into the very gorge that's like a roadway almost where Pharaoh's army was. Okay, so they were really trapped. They weren't able to go up or down the beach because there's mountains and rocks jutting out into the water. Okay? So then Adonai made Pharaoh hard-hearted, and he pursued the people of Israel as they left boldly. Okay? The real word is Yad Ramah, from the word Rum, which means they left with a high hand. All right? And that means boldly or brazenly. Now, there's another word, like the word fire, that happens over and over again, beginning in the second chapter of Exodus, going all the way through the actual Exodus, and it's the word Yad, okay, or sometimes Yod. You know what that means? Hand. So the word hand is used over and over and over again. Okay? Moses is at the beginning, he's picking up a rod or a staff or like a walking staff, taking it in his hand. Okay? So he has this in his hand. And then the hand of Egypt is against Israel. And so what happens is Yehovah delivers Israel by his mighty right arm or hand. It's one word. Okay? So you have all of these uses of hand, which are very interesting. And now what's going to happen is when, we'll see in a minute, Moses is going to have to raise his hand over the water. Later on, he's going to use his hand to bring water out of the rock. So it's interesting. Okay, as Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel looked up, saw the Egyptians right there coming after them in great fear. The people of Israel cried out to Adonai. Reger writes, only 2 verses earlier, the Israelites were described as leaving Egypt defiantly. That's with a high hand. Boldly, they left Egypt, okay? But the moment they see the Egyptians pursuing them, they cower. Understandably, given their centuries of servitude, the Israelites still have a slave mentality. That is right on. Okay? And that means they weren't able to go to war. And they're prone to great fear and anxiety. Just like anybody who had been a slave for all of your life and then maybe generations, instantly, all right, you're free. Like, what do you expect them to do? Just instantly go out and get a job and be like everybody else? No, because they have that mind, okay? Human beings are very programmable. You know that, right? Okay? Just look at the next generation, right? How they've been programmed, all right? Same thing going on with the Israelites, okay? So then Yehovah said to Moses, the people of Israel said to Moses, was it because there weren't enough graves in Egypt that you brought us out to die in the desert? Why have you done this to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we tell you in Egypt to let us alone? We'll just go on being slaves for the Egyptians? It would be better for us to be the Egyptian slaves than to die in the desert. Which is, think about that. What that means is what they are basically saying is, we would rather be enslaved than be free. Well, thank goodness that isn't going on today anywhere, right? Okay. Sometimes we bow at the altar of safety, and we end up being slaves. Yeah, sometimes. That's right. Okay. When you were not made to live that way. All right? That's what's going on here with Israel. They were used to living that way, and they didn't know what else to do. This is why, because you would think that by now, with all of these miracles and all of these wonders and signs that Yehovah had done, I mean, like big ones, signs in the heavens and darkness and smoke and now fire and cloud and like the heavens rumbling, and yet it's like they didn't remember any of that. Okay? Which is a message to us to always remember what God has done. That's one of the most important reasons for reading the Tanakh. If we get rid of all the history of Israel, we get rid of our history. Right? And then we have nothing to go on. We don't know who we are. We're like lost in the world. Just like in America, if we don't remember our history, then we're just going to invent something new. Like we're doing right now. Let's invent something new. I don't know, I don't like that. Let's do it like this. Okay, yeah. They did it like that. Like 8 other groups of people did it like that, and every one of them ended in mass death. Is that what you want to do? What do you mean? We don't know that. Of course you don't know that, because you don't know history. Anyway, sorry. I get on a soapbox. So Moses answered the people, "Stop being so fearful. Remain steady, and you will see how Adonai is going to save you. He will do it today. Today you have seen the Egyptians, but you will never see them again. Adonai will do battle for you. Just calm yourselves down." And then Adonai asked Moses, "Why are you crying to me? Tell the people of Israel to go forward. Lift your staff, reach out with your hand over the sea, and divide it in two. The people of Israel will advance into the sea on dry ground." So, a couple of amazing things about that. One is that Yehovah's words to Moses were not, "Moses, lift your staff and I will divide the waters." That's amazing. What were his words? Lift your staff and divide the waters. Yes, an act of faith. And Moses, you do it. I think that's the same thing going on much later on, when Paul writes about his thorn in the flesh, and he asked God to remove it. And he didn't. God didn't remove it. God said what to him? "My charis is enough for you." Okay? In other words, I've already given you what you need. Now you do it. Okay? It's like God values us, we who are made in his image, enough that he doesn't do everything for us. He actually expects us to get up and do whatever it is. Yes?
Dee did a word study on this.
Dee did,
And 3 times in the Bible was this specific word used. But when we had Torah and Moses was told, you need to drive these people out, or they will become thorns in your flesh.
Yes.
So this thorn thing in her study always refers to a person.
Yes.
So she's saying we take the initiative to drive out these thorns.
Drive them out. That is right. Yeah, good word. We drive them out. Moses divides the water. Now, yes, there was a wind. Okay? So in other words, Yehovah did it. He helped. But would he have done it if Moses had not raised his hand? I think maybe not. I think in a later reading when you read about his hand, or later in this reading where you read about his hand being raised when they're fighting Amalek, and when his hand was up, they're winning. When his hand went down, they're not winning. Okay? Same idea going on here. All right? Now, Israel, if you read this in like the NAS or the ESV or something like that, the verses we just read, what you hear is, or the idea that you get is, fear not, stand still, and behold the salvation of the Lord. Okay? However, the word isn't stand still. That's not what it means. Because you read that, stand still, and it gives you the idea that what he wants Israel to do is just kind of hang. Just, it's all right. It's going to be all right, guys. Relax. Just watch. Okay, that's all you need to do. That is not all they needed to do. They had to take action. Okay? There's almost always action involved from us when we want God to do something. Right? And it's that way with Israel. So what did they have to do? Well, there's a list, okay? Number one, stop being afraid. Deal with it. Get it out of your life. Don't allow it in anymore. There's a thorn right there in the flesh, is fear. So he's like, stop it. Okay, so that's number one. By the way, fear and anxiety and worry is a manifestation of what? Lack of trust in Yehovah. And it doesn't matter if it's, quote, normal, or if it's, oh, well, that's to be expected. It doesn't matter. It is what it is. Okay, now, around here, when we find out that we have a sin in our life, what do? Hallelujah! I can get rid of that. Okay? If I don't know that I have it, it's not going to be easy to get rid of. But if I know that I have it, I can get rid of it. So if I know that I have fear, that is a synonym of worry or anxiety, then I can do something about that. Now, what brings fear and worry and anxiety into our lives? The news, the morning news, the noon news, the evening news, the newspaper, the news. Okay? What else? I don't know, but man, I mean, talking to people sometimes, it's like, I mean, I keep up on the news. All right? But I know when it starts to bother me. I know when I start to get worried, no more. Okay? When it begins to bother my mind and whatever, and I'm beginning to worry, oh no, there's a balloon, and it flew over Alaska. Do you know what this means? We're all going to die. Okay? And you know what? The reality is we are all going to die. The question is where and when, but it'll happen, all right? Unless we're the generation that whoosh, right? But anyway, that's the bottom line. The bottom line is they haven't yet trusted Yehovah. Okay? They did a little bit, but then they lost it. What? Can that happen? I thought once you did it, you never went away. Sorry. It's like getting your body in condition. You get your body in condition and then you like sit around and eat donuts for a month. Your body's not going to hold its condition, right? Same thing with our walk with God. A different condition, that's right. Okay, second, remain steady. This is the word that in the NAS and the other versions, a lot of other English versions, it says stand still. But in Hebrew, it's hit yatsev, and it means basically get ready for duty. It's like a military word. That means get ready for action because you're going to be acting, okay? It's like being in the army or something, and they go, chain, hut, and everybody's there. That's what it means. You're ready. You're ready for your orders. It doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, okay? Number 3, see how Adonai's going to save you. In other words, open your eyes to what's about to happen. Notice the word is not, open your eyes and look at the Egyptians. Okay? It's really easy to get your eyes and your focus on whatever it is that's about to happen. All right? Rather than putting your eyes and your focus on, wow, I wonder what God's going to do in the middle of this one. Right? So that's what they were supposed to do. And then, finally, advance, move, go, walk. Now, do you think that was easy?
No, but you know, all the songs, David always speaks to his soul.
Yes, he does.
And so here, when he said, just calm yourself down, that's a personal.
That's right.
To remember and to talk. I mean, before you can advance, you've got to have.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep. You got to get your, because what we don't want is a million or whatever Israelites and mixed multitude running down into the where the waters were going, the Egyptians are coming. The Egyptians are. No. God's making them into an army. Okay? It says when they left, when he brought them out of Egypt, they left as an army. Okay? God's army, because that's what they're going to need to be. Right? Because they're going to have to go up into the land, and now they're going to have to get rid of all the squatters that were in the land. And so they had to be made into an army. Okay? Now, he says that they will go into the midst of the sea on dry ground. That word dry ground, that phrase is mentioned 5 times in this passage. But in the book of Exodus, it's mentioned I don't know how many times. Over and over again, whenever they speak of going in the sea, it was always on dry ground. Okay, that says something. It says that when God does something, he does it all the way. Right? And so the idea of them slogging through a marsh, and maybe the water moved out of the way enough so that they could barely get through, but it was, squish, squish, squish as they're walking, and they didn't have their extra tufts on. No, it wasn't that way at all. It's very specific. They walked through on dry ground. Okay? Now, Moses, he reached his hand out over the sea, and Adonai caused the sea to go back before a strong east wind all night. He made the sea become dry ground, and its water was divided in two. And then the people of Israel went into the sea on the dry ground, with the water walled up for them on their right and on their left. And by the way, if you can take a 1 foot swamp and make a wall of water out of it on your right and your left, then that's a miracle, right? It wasn't a swamp, okay? Now, in Hebrew, the word sea means chaos, and it's the word yam. Okay, and there's the letters, the ancient letters. The pictograph is a pictograph of a hand and waves, which means to make chaos. All right. So Moses reached his hand out over the sea, and by dawn, the sea had returned to its former depth. The Egyptians tried to flee. I think I missed a page. Did I miss a page? 4, 5? No, I guess I didn't. Okay. Sorry. The Egyptians tried to flee, but Adonai swept them into the sea. The water came back and covered all the chariots and cavalry of Pharaoh's army who had followed them into the sea. Not even one of them was left. Okay? So, Yehovah destroyed the enemy. Okay? Same thing with our enemy. And by our enemy, I mean Satan. Okay? His demise is in hand. He's already beaten him. Okay? And we read about that in Colossians, where Paul writes about Yeshua stripping the rulers and authorities of their power. So he won a battle on the cross or the stake. And the battle that he won was over the worst of all enemies. What's the worst of all enemies? Death. Okay? Paul even says that the final enemy is death. Death is the worst of all enemies. Yeshua beat death, right? He destroyed death. For us, those of you guys that have been doing your readings in John, I've loved the readings in John, realize for those of us that are walking with him and have his life in us never ends. Okay, there's eternal life, his life in us. So that means, as he says in John 11, when he's talking to Mary and Martha about Lazarus, and he says, look, if you're living and you're trusting in me, you're going to live even if you die. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. You're going to live even if you die. So you're going to die. So what? You're going to live even if you die. And I can tell you my belief about that is the moment that you expire, which means you're to stop breathing, the air goes out, your spirit is with Yehovah. And if you ask me where, my answer is, I don't know. Why does it matter? If you're with Yehovah, you're good to go. And then one day, new heavens and a new earth. Wow, everything's been made new.
Well, the word says that to be absent in the body is to be present with the Lord.
That's right.
That's where you go.
Yeah, that's right. That's where you go. Present with the Lord. Okay. Now imagine a people that had no fear of death at all. What they would be able to do. Hello, that's us. Right? Okay. Now, when Israel, this is very interesting. When Israel saw the mighty deed, so that one, the mighty deed that Adonai had performed against the Egyptians, the people feared Adonai, and they believed in Adonai and in his servant Moses. Believed means trust. Okay? They trusted in God and they trusted in Moses once they witnessed this amazing miracle. And it lasted how long? 3 days or less is how long it lasted. It lasted until they realized, we don't have any water. Oh no. Okay, and then it all went away. All right, now, what that will prove over and over and over again is, we need to know this. Number one, miracles, signs, and wonders do not necessarily bring lasting faith. Okay? They might bring it for a moment. Because you're like, wow! Okay, but then what happens? Life happens. And we have this habit of not remembering, right? Forgetting what God has done, okay? Secondly, belief or trust in God is an ongoing process of walking with Him. It's not a boom, one event, you're in, good, you now trust, and nothing's ever going to happen again. No, it's ongoing. All right? So Israel made it through this danger, and then in the 15th chapter, they're all celebrating and dancing with tambourines and timbrels and all of that. Why? Because the Egyptian army was destroyed. So you have these words, I will sing to Adonai, for he is highly exalted. The horse and its rider he threw into the sea. The notes there by Prager were very instructive to me, that there's a well-known passage in the Talmud. You know what that is? It's a collection of Jewish rabbis' writings about Torah. So, comments, if you will. Okay, that the angels broke out in song when the Egyptians were drowning in the sea. But in the Talmud, you read that God rebuked the angels for doing that. He said, my creatures, meaning the Egyptians, are drowning, and you sing songs? Okay? It is also critical to note the angels' celebration is not necessarily a victory for Jews or Israel, but a victory for morality. The death of those doing evil is ultimately a human tragedy, but it is infinitely less tragic than the alternative. Okay? In the prophet Ezekiel, this is not in the notes, but in Ezekiel, you read that Yehovah takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. Okay? So, what you have here is you have an example of human beings acting like human beings. It's VE Day, victory in Egypt, or victory over Egypt, and the Israelites are understandably happy, and they're rejoicing, and they're singing songs about the death of the Egyptians, and the horses, and the riders, and the water, and the woo-woo, all that. Miriam's song. Miriam, it's called Moses and Miriam's, because Miriam does it as well. When Moses gets done, Miriam chimes up and leads everybody in the choir again. Now, there's some really neat statements in this song, like in the second verse, Yah is my strength and my song, and he has become my Yeshua. Those are neat words, right? This is my God. I will glorify him. My Father's God, and I will exalt him. And even in the Hebrew Torah scrolls, they look like that is Hebrew there. You can read it if you have a magnifying glass. Okay, but notice the way that it's arranged. It's arranged so that it looks like Israel's walking through the water. Okay? In the way that the Torah is written there. Okay? Now, all of these words, all of this glory, all of this dancing, all of this celebrating. Remember, how many days is it till they lose all that? Less than 3 days later. They lost all of that. Okay? Okay, verse 3. Adonai is a warrior. Adonai is his name. It literally is, Yehovah is a man of war. Okay? Now, if Yehovah is a man of war, and Yeshua is the Prince of Peace, how in the world does that go together? It's exactly right. Sometimes the only way you get peace is through war. And the reason is, and I know this is one of those things that today, people will be like, what? What do you mean? But here it is. There are evil people in the world. There are bad, wicked, evil people in the world. It's the way it is. A lot of them, because they want power, get to be rulers of nations. And they get armies at their hand. And they're evil. And they're wicked. and they're not going to go away by being nice to them. It's the way of the devil in the world, isn't it? Okay? Now, the peoples have heard, and they tremble. Anguish takes hold of those living in Peleshet, which is really Philistia, which is the land of the dreaded Philistines. Several centuries later, when the Romans conquer Judea, they wanted to obliterate the memory of Israel, so they renamed Judea Palestine. So when you hear that word today and you're like, no, the name of it is Palestine. Like, well, that's what the Romans named it. That wasn't the original name. And the reason the Romans named it that is they wanted to get rid of the name of Israel. Same thing's going on today. It's been going on for thousands of years. Okay? So now Moses led Israel onward from the Sea of Suf, and they went out into the Shur desert. But after traveling 3 days in the desert, they found no water. They arrived at Marah, but couldn't drink the water there because it was bitter. That's why it's called Marah, which is bitterness. The people grumbled against Moses. See the bitterness? They grumbled against Moses, and they asked, what are we to drink? Moses cried to Adonai, and Adonai showed him a certain piece of wood, which when he threw it in the water, made the water taste good. What a strange story. It's almost a preview of the book of 2 Kings, which is also filled with these strange stories of prophets doing this, that, and the other, and you're like, what in the world? Okay? So you have the word bitter there, which in Hebrew is the word marah, which in the ancient pictograph means chaos in the head. So if you have bitterness, you have chaos in your head. And it's evident, right? Okay? So the water was bitter. They'd gone 3 days, and then they began to get bitter and grumble and complain. So Moses, think of it this way. Moses got a branch or a piece of wood from a tree, dropped it in the water, and the water was made sweet. All the bitterness left. Okay, so where else in the Bible is there a tree? That is important. What? Yes, Yeshua died on a tree. In Deuteronomy, says that everyone who dies on a tree is cursed. Okay? All of those go together. So now Moses, taking a piece of a tree, drops it in the water. What he's doing is he's given like a picture of Messiah. Same thing with the water coming out of the rock. It's all very cool, really. Okay. There Adonai made laws and rules of life for them. And there he tested them. He said, if you will listen intently, or shema, to the voice of Adonai your God, do what he considers right, pay attention to his mitzvot, and observe his laws, I will not afflict you with any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, because I am Adonai your healer. I would point out, yes? You look like you're going to say something.
Well,
Kathy.
because it says there, he made the laws and rules of life for them, but that's the 10, and the 10 haven't been given yet.
Ah, that's right. At least they haven't been given yet in written form, all 10 of them. But there are going to be 1 or 2 of them that they're going to be reminded of along the way, like Shabbat. They get reminded of Shabbat before they get to the commandment, remember Shabbat, 3 times. They're reminded about this rest, that they're supposed to rest on that day. Okay? So, how does he test them? It says he made laws and rules of life for them, and there he tested them. How does he test us? How did he test Abraham? All right, yes, he requested that Abraham bring his son up to a mountain. But what was the test in there? Whether he would or not. Okay? So it's always whether or not you're going to obey. So that's what he's doing to Israel here, is finding out, are you going to obey me or are you not going to obey me? Right? Okay? It's not like I'm going to test you by throwing cancer on you. No. That's like the devil doing that. Okay? He's the disease guy. Okay, so there in the desert, the whole community of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. According to Prager, the grumbling the Israelites did, and here's the quote, that miracles do not necessarily lead to faith. It's a miracle is what gives people faith. This faith won't last long. Why? Shortly after a miracle, what do people want? Another miracle. Another miracle. We need miracles. God, we need miracles. Bring us more miracles. Yeah, I know we had those, but those were little miracles. Now we want a bigger miracle. Hold on there. Okay? I think you're running after the wrong thing in that. That doesn't mean that miracles aren't, that we aren't to expect miracles follow those that trust in Yehovah. They do. They absolutely do. But I think there are things that are miracles that we don't even realize are miracles every day. Every day is filled up with miracles. Your eye is a miracle. Okay? I mean, over and over and over again, we have things going on that are miracles. But the people of Israel said to them, we wish that Adonai had used his own hand to kill us off in Egypt. There we used to sit around the pots with the meat boiling, and we had as much food as we wanted. But you have taken us out in the desert to let this whole assembly starve to death. Sounds like a trail life camp out. With the boys, take them out in the woods. What are we going to eat? I don't know. What do you got in your backpack there to eat? I'm still hungry. Well, I guess you'll bring more next time, won't you? Okay, now, very interesting, and ask, why are the children of Israel griping about not having meat? They have flocks and herds. They have meat galore that left Egypt with them. Well, in Robert Alter's Bible translation, he writes this in his comments. Commentaries have puzzled over the nostalgia for meat because the Israelites have taken large flocks with them. Perhaps as a people whose principal wealth is their flocks, they are loath to make heavy inroads into their livestock for the purpose of food on the journey. In other words, they know they're going to need them when they get to the land. And they're going to need them to offer them to Yehovah as sacrifices, because that's one of the reasons they went into the desert. So it wasn't just we don't have any meat, it's we don't have any meat to eat, because that's not what this is there for, at least not right now. So what does God do? He's like, all right, I'll give you meat. So Moses added, what I have said will happen when Adonai gives you meat to eat this evening and your fill of bread tomorrow. Excuse me. Adonai has listened to your complaints and grumblings against him. What are we? Your grumblings are not against us, but against Adonai. And then quail covered the camp of Israel. By the way, Mark Patterson in the Circle Maker estimated that there would need to be about 105 million quail in order to feed all of the people that had been there. 105 million. I don't know if he's right, but maybe he's within 100,000. It's still an amazing number of quail that are there. Have you ever been out somewhere and suddenly there are this flock of birds, and it's like there's thousands of them. They're just like darkness hovers over you as these birds fly over you. So it isn't that the quail didn't exist. Yehovah just had to gather them all together and dump them in the camp of the Israelites, right? The bread-like substance, as you all know, was manna, literally man, okay, is the Hebrew word, and it's a word that means, what is it? Which is what they named it. And then manna is not about manna. The bread in the wilderness was not about God giving them bread in the wilderness. Ultimately, the bread in the wilderness was another what? Test, in order to find out if they were going to listen to him when he said, go out and collect it 6 days. On the 6th day, I'll give you double what you need. And then you don't need to go out on the 7th day. And lo and behold, what did they do? They didn't listen, and they went out on the 7th day. And God was like, oy vey, how long are you going to not listen to me? You know, like, what do I have to do with you guys? Okay? All right, and this is why you have in Deuteronomy 8 that he humbled you, allowing you to become hungry, and then fed you with manna, which neither you nor your ancestors had known, to make you understand that a person does not live on bread or food alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of Adonai. Okay, which is the text that Yeshua used in his overcoming the temptation with the devil. Okay, now, Moses said to Aaron, take a jar, put in it 2 quarts of manna, and set it aside before Adonai to be kept through all your generations. Just as Adonai ordered Moses, Aaron set it aside where? Before the testimony. That means the ark. But the ark wasn't made yet. It hadn't been built yet, the Ark of the Covenant. That's later in the book of Exodus. So what's going on here is the editor, is giving you, is letting you know that when that happened with the manna, it was in Moses' mind, we're going to hang on to this. Okay? It's going to be a memory. And the editor is letting you know that the ark is on its way. Okay, they're going to build an ark. There's going to be a testimony, and this manna, a hunk of this manna, is going to be in it. Okay? And it's not going to have worms. And you can wrap it in aluminum foil and wait until the day when the ark is there, and then open it up and stick it in the ark. No, that's not in there. People will leave and say, our pastor said there was aluminum foil. Okay. So now in the 17th chapter, once again, they're crying out for water because there's no water. So Adonai says to Moses in verse 5, go on ahead of the people and bring with you the leaders of Israel. Take your staff in your hand, the one you used to strike the river, meaning the river, the Nile, okay, and go, and I will stand in front of you there on the rock in Oreb. Whoa, God's gonna stand there with Moses, okay? You are to strike the rock, and water will come out of it so the people can drink. So, amazingly, as Prager pointed out, this is the rod that Moses used in order to turn the Nile into blood. Now this is the rod that Moses will use in order to give the Israelites drinking water. So with that rod, he took away the Egyptians' drinking water, and with that rod, he's going to give the Israelites drinking water. That's kind of neat. Now, later on in Corinthians, Paul makes a midrash about this rock and this event. And in it, basically, he says the rock in the wilderness was the Messiah. The rock was Christ.
Is there any indication here, though, that when Jehovah said, I will stand in front of you there, that the people
Acknowledged that? Or knew that? No. None. There's no indication of that other than Moses knowing it. Because Moses is the one that got that message, that I will be there, standing there in front of you, okay? But the thing is, when Moses struck the rock, that's another one of those symbols. If the rock is struck and the rock gives water, then the way your later Jewish believers in Yeshua are going to interpret that is that Messiah is the living water. Well, didn't he say that? He said, I am the living water. Okay. And he's going to be struck, but only once. Okay. Later on, Moses gets angry and strikes the rock twice, which gives the wrong picture. And he gets in trouble for doing that, right? Because he struck the rock once. From then on, what he's supposed to do when he needs water is speak to the rock. Okay, the rock has already been struck, so it's already giving its water. Now, speak to the rock. Same thing with us. The Messiah was stricken, okay, once. Now, how do we get the living water? Ask. Speak to him. Yes, very good. Okay, and then last is in that along lines with the living water. You have the quote there from John, where Yeshua is talking about being the living water, literally while the priest is pouring out water and quoting Isaiah about the waters of Yeshua in Hebrew. And then the last thing is at the end you have this brief war with Amalek. All right, and Adonai said to Moses, write this in a book to be remembered. Tell it to Joshua. I will completely blot out the memory of Amalek from under heaven. And then Prager writes about the fact that to this day in Jewish life, if there's a very evil man or woman, a very evil ruler or whatever, they will say, rather than saying his name, they will mention the name, and then they'll make this statement in Hebrew, Yamach Shmo Vezikrono. May his name and memory be blotted out. Okay, may his name and memory be blotted out. They do that with Satan as well. Okay, whenever they mention Satan, they say, Satan, may his name be erased. Okay, they do the same thing with Hitler. Hitler, may his name be erased. Okay, this is where they get that idea from this verse right here. Okay. We have 3 minutes for questions, or a little longer. Questions?
A comment. It's said many times, anyone who calls out to God, of God, gets help. That's a message.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, and I'm just saying there's, we would hope we wouldn't fall in with the Israelites and all of these things, but they witnessed so much, and they couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
His graciousness and been so thankful. You took care of us just a few years ago. We're looking for you to take care of us now.
Kathy is bringing up the idea that in the Bible it indicates that when we cry out to God, He helps us. All right, which He does. Sometimes He helps us by helping us know what to do in a situation, right? A lot of times He helps us like that. Sometimes He helps us with miracles, okay? And we don't want to be like Israel and not remember what God has done and just keep whining, right? But has anybody ever done that? Has anybody ever forgotten what God has done and it brought you into a place where you were like, oops? Only me? Am I the only one? Bless you. Okay, me and Dana, we're the only ones. Okay, all right, all of us, that's happened, yeah. And this is one of the reasons why in Corinthians, where Paul is writing about this rock in that whole section there in Corinthians, he begins out by saying, hey, you guys, all of this was written down for our instruction so that we wouldn't be like Israel back then that did this and this and this and this and this. So we're supposed to look at it and go, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to remember. I don't want to forget. So, yes, Dana.
I've always thought it was interesting how maybe in our thoughts and our minds and in our different ideas that we think about as we read through the Bible, we do tend to get carried away with something. And we think that this stuff means this, that means something else.
Right.
And I've witnessed all of that through most of my life in reading different doctrines and different things that I've read. Even though we tend to think, well, this is what God meant, then all of a sudden it comes back and you say, oh, he meant something different. And I don't know, just going through the classes for the past 5 years, it's almost erased. All the stuff that I remembered and brought new stuff in.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And I always used to think about the tower of fire, or the column of fire, pillar of fire, and the pillar of cloud.
Yeah.
And I always used to think, well, okay, that the fire can only be at the daytime, and the cloud can only be at night. Because that's how, or no, put it the other way around.
Yeah.
Because that's what he said. That's how he said it's going to work. And then all of a sudden, the cloud and the fire are working at the same time when they're at the place to go across on the Exodus. And then it just puts a kink in our eyes.
You know, the Bible does that. The more you read it, the more you realize it. You know, we learn all of these ideas, and I was thinking about that today. I think it was in today's reading or yesterday's reading when we're reading out of John. And Yeshua makes this statement. He says, my teaching is from my Father. Okay? And I was thinking about that, and I was like, all right, he's a rabbi. I mean, he's not like the other rabbis, but in some ways, he is like the other rabbis, okay? And what he's saying is the things that I am teaching you about how to live, I'm giving you God's version. You're getting man's version from all of these other rabbis. I'm giving you God's version, and I'll show you how to do it, okay? And then I started thinking, wow, that would be a really neat book about Yeshua's halakha. What did he teach about the way that we're to live? Because everything you read in the Gospels is not about that. Some of it's about who he is. Some of it's about who the disciples are. But the sections where he's like teaching them how to live, it'd be nice to have that all together, you know, in one. So... And to realize that every one of those is a way to go back into Torah, take one of its principles, pull it up into his day, and look at it and go, by the way, this is the way we do this. This is how this means, okay? I'm starting right now at this moment, talking to you. Okay, Matthew, was that you with a question? All right, you have the mic.
Something kind of popped up at me while you were talking, and I assume you probably thought of it. If you haven't, you won't know, but Moses grew up Egyptian. The Israelites were enslaved for 200 years or more. I don't know the dates on that off the top of my head. How was the Hebrew language preserved? How did Moses write Hebrew?
Well, there's an idea about that in the book that I brought up in the beginning, but by Miles Jones on the writing of God. Okay, and that the language, the letters were given to Moses on the mountain. When he gave him the commandments, he didn't only give him the commandments, but he gave him a language as well. And there's a verse in the, I don't remember exactly where it is. It's in Exodus about God giving Moses a language or a writing and a commandments, and which is where he gets that idea. So, and ultimately I don't know. I think that written language would have developed right about then. It did in other places in the world. It was beginning to develop. In Egypt, they did not have letters. They had pictures that represented ideas, but not letters, not words like we have with, A, B, E. So, anyway, good question. Okay, anybody else?
Does it? China only have pictures now?
China has pictures now. Yeah, I think that's right. Yep.
Pat,
Yes.
I have a question about the letters that you were talking about earlier,
Uh-huh.
the vowel sounds.
Yes.
I was showing the book where they found some scrolls and they actually scanned it and made it into a book. It doesn't have any English letters, but I did find the name of Yahweh, and under the first letter, the Yud, there's like a semicolon.
A semicolon.
and,
Yeah, that's a
Right.
Uh-huh. Sounds like yeah.
Okay.
So we say
and
yeah.
then after between the second letter, the Hey,
Mm-hmm.
and between the third letter, there is a T.
That's your
Like you
ah
said,
in the Yehovah. Uh-huh. Yep.
And then above the Vav, there's a little dot.
Okay.
And then nothing else. That's it.
The dot above the Vav is an O
Oh.
in the vowels.
How would you pronounce that?
Yehovah. That's why we get Jehovah, all right, or Yehovah. But you got to remember that when the letters were given for over 1,000 years, there were no vowels. So all they had were the letters. They had none of those vowels. Those vowels didn't come along till about 500 years after Yeshua. So back in the early medieval days is when they invented the vowels for Hebrew. Before that, it was only consonants. So,
Thanks.
good question. Okay, guys, it's getting late, so I will let you go. Be blessed. Have a great week. Walking in Yeshua's Halakha, not Hanukkah. Okay, good night, y'all. Yep, that's a good idea. I should write another book.